Hi everyone, and welcome to our lightning talk here for the ALM conference. Ours is entitled Screen Reader Accessible Referencing Guidance, working with disabled people to rethink how we do it. My name is Tom Peach. I'm the Academic Services Manager at York St John, and I'm joined by Holly Tuke. Do you want to introduce yourself, Holly?
Hi, my name's Holly Tuke and I am an Assistive Technology Advisor at York St John. Today we are thinking about disability, accessibility and referencing guidance.
So for today, we are firstly thinking about the why, so the lived experience of referencing. Why do we need accessible referencing guidance?
Next, we'll be looking at screen readers and how they work.
Next, after that, we'll be looking at the solutions that we came up with. So how did we rethink visual guidance?
And finally, we'll be looking at next steps. So we'll be sharing what's next in terms of accessible referencing materials.
So for transparency and accountability, it's really important for us to be open about our lived experience approaching this topic.
So I am registered blind and I'm also a screen reader user.
And I'm a sighted person. So firstly, the why. So it's really important to start off by saying that the work that we've done here and that we are doing doesn't replace any of the necessary work to rethink referencing as a currently ableist practice. And it doesn't undo any of the work that is needed to remake ableist academic structures of knowledge at all. This sits alongside that as part of the journey to making that happen.
Adding to that, it's really important to share lived experiences of making referencing accessible or the lack of accessibility within referencing. So before working at York St John, I was a student myself, and my personal experiences of referencing were that it was a very inaccessible task, it was complicated, and I often had to get sighted support, which took away my independence.
Okay, so now that we have heard about some lived experience of referencing as really inaccessible, it's important for us to think about and understand how do screen readers actually work and why is referencing guidance so inaccessible. So to start off, Holly, how do screen readers work? What is it that they do?
So screen readers read out loud what's on the screen in synthesized speech. That could be emails, documents, web pages, books, or any materials that you're trying to access. So people use the keyboard to navigate using a screen reader as they aren't accessible with a mouse. That is different for things like touchscreen, however, and that's worth bearing in mind. But they will read everything out loud so that blind or visually impaired people or people with dyslexia or other learning disabilities or difficulties are able to have that information in an audible way.
So now that we've heard about how screen readers work, we've got an audio recording of what referencing guidance sounds like through a screen reader. Now the screen reader that is reading out here is JAWS. If you cannot hear, if you're not able to hear this recording, you can follow on with the captions.
Heading Level 2 Books. Table 2, Uniform Table Format. Author published year, title of book in italics, edition if not first, place of publication, publisher, column 2 of 2. Example selected, row 2 of 2, column 1 of 2, Hennessy I and Jap A 2016 The Psychology of Attitudes and Attitude Change, 2nd ed., Edinburgh Churchill Livingston.
So now that we've heard that screen reader guidance, you as librarians and information professionals will notice that there is information missing from that recording that you would need to know for your referencing. So Holly, what kinds of information do screen readers not read out?
So in that example, you may have heard that the screen readers didn't read out all of the punctuation and they didn't read out any formatting, so things like italics.
Fantastic. And in your screen reader, is it possible to configure that so that it will do that?
Yeah, so you can configure it to your liking, and that may include reading all of the punctuation, for example, rather than most, or you can change the formatting so it will read things that are underlined or italicized or maybe in bold if you're using that kind of formatting. And it will also read spelling and grammatical errors as well if you set it to that. But it's important to remember that all of these settings are very personal and unique to each user. For some people, they may not want everything being read out loud because it might be information overload, or people may want everything read out loud because they feel that gives them the ability to access all of that information. And it's also worth remembering that you can customize the speed of the voice and the voice itself.
Fantastic. So something that we took into consideration here is that we didn't think it was fair to expect users who use a screen reader to have to change their settings every single time to access referencing guidance to make it accessible. That seemed like a really unfair adjustment to have to ask students to make. And also, if students don't know that they need to make that alteration, how would they know to go and customize their settings if we didn't tell them? So we had to come up with a different solution, and that meant thinking about referencing guidance in a different and audible way. So our solution was to recognise that referencing guidance is often a very visual practice, as is referencing itself, using referencing. So we need to rethink referencing guidance through an audible framing. So thinking about how can we rebuild this guidance in an audible fashion. On the screen, we've got an example of the solution that we came up with, and I'm going to play an audio clip of this now.
Blank. Heading level 2 books. Heading level 3 format. Author or authors left parenthesis published year right parenthesis title of book in italics full stop edition if not the first full stop place of publication colon publisher full stop. Blank. Heading level 3 example. Hennessy, I full stop and Jap, a full stop left parenthesis 2016 right parenthesis the psychology of attitudes and attitude change full stop second ed full stop Edinburgh Churchill Livingston full stop.
So we came up with some solutions to make the visual aspects of referencing more accessible in an audible way. We replaced punctuation marks with written punctuation. So this included things like writing the commas or the brackets. So for example, JAWS would pause when there was a comma, but if someone maybe didn't know that that was the case, or they weren't aware and kind of having to really concentrate, having that written punctuation mark really helps them to know where they need to put their own brackets or commas within their referencing. We also audibly described all formatting. So as you could hear or see in that example, it pronounced things like italics, and so that meant that screen reader users will know which parts of the reference need to go in italics, for example.
Okay, so our testing and next steps. So we took the referencing guidance through several rounds of testing, which included comprehensibility testing to see how the referencing guidance sounded. So did it actually make sense? Was it easy to understand? And that led us to actually reintroduce some punctuation marks to aid with screen readers reading the text in a speech-like fashion rather than just in a continuous stream of words. Adding the punctuation back in helped with the screen reader passing that text. We took the guidance to a visually impaired student user group, and that was received really, really positive. We had some really great feedback from that.
We will also be taking it to more user-focused groups in 2021 and 2022. It's really important to make this a continuous process because everyone has different experiences when it comes to screen readers. So each screen reader user's experiences are not the same. We all have our own preferences when it comes to accessibility. We also think that ongoing testing is needed as screen reader behaviours change when updates come in the future and advances in technology progress.
And it's also really important to note that from our context, the work that we've done is on our own internal quick start referencing guidance for all the referencing styles that we have. Most of our more extensive guidance is provided by Cite Them Right Online, and obviously this work doesn't do anything to improve the accessibility of those third-party provided referencing guidance. Thanks for listening. You can contact us at our work email addresses at t.peach or h.tuke@yorksj.ac.uk or on Twitter at thomaspeachlib or at Life of a Blind Girl.